Hello, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to another author interview here on the channel. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today, my guest is a first timer here on the channel. Since before he could remember, the Imagine shaped every aspect of his life. From the toys that came alive when given a name and a voice, to the world around him that melted into something more than initially met the eye. Although not all living creatures could tell their stories, my guest found solace and deeper understanding when he witnessed their context and gave them a dialogue. This was not only where he had the best times, but the place that he has fought desperately to remain in throughout his life. In short, he has always feared the day when enchantment, wonder, and mystery would suffer genocide, only to be revisited by the occasional short lived nostalgic moment. Although flying dragons, monsters, and other mythical beasts may forever exist in fantasy, let us do our very best in creating a compassionate, loving, and peaceful world. One that won't merely be found in the fiction section of our local bookstores, but littered between the pages of our lives. If that is not an introduction, my viewers and listeners, I don't know what is. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, Mr. S.M. Atlas. Atlas, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. I thank you for the opportunity.
No problem, Atlas. And I must say, that is quite the introduction, I must say. Out of all the introductions I've given on my channel, this is probably definitely in my top 10 author introductions. So, from this introduction that I just read, you have been very involved in imagination in the creative world. And I'm very curious from the inception. So, were you always a creative person growing up? And if so, what was sort of the aha moment later in life where you decided to make the decision to not only create your own stories, but share them with the rest of the world and other writers as well?
Yeah, I have. So to give you an idea, for a long time, I would write not just stories, but I would write music. I play music. I actually performed in a lot of different places and a couple of
Okay.
countries as well. And I went to an art school. I graduated from an art high school, and I sold art pieces in galleries. So yeah, art has, and that comes, and you see it in the actual introduction pages of my book. It actually comes, or maybe was born from my interactions with my older brother. He's an
Okay.
artist, and he's done things for Blizzard. He worked on a couple of things for Big Hero 6. And
Wow.
things like that. Yeah, so it actually I don't know, there was like this creative spark that I think happened while I was watching him, and he was drawing since he can grab a pen. So with me it was kind of more telling the story, and he was kind of illustrating the story. So you know, both sides kind of meshed together really well. As far as kind of like that boost, right? That kind of got me
Right.
into it. I think it may have started there. The want to share with other people, it has a lot to do with what and thank you for not your very kind words on the introduction. But it does have to do with that, you know, making the kind of world that you don't just find in the fiction section of a book, where, you know, a lot of things are always going to be fiction, you know,
Right.
they're always, you know, like, you know, mythological creatures flying across the sky, you know, tearing
Hmm.
down all that's again. We don't have, or at least now, right? We don't have the ability to bring these things to life. But what we do have the power to bring is that kind of peace, love, understanding, just to create, like I said, like create that kind of world. This has a lot to do with it for me.
Nice. So let's actually talk about your upcoming book, which when I went onto your Instagram, how I found Atlas, everyone, and your website, I must say, out of all the author websites that I've gone to, yours is definitely the most unique I have ever seen.
Thanks.
The artwork, the introduction to the world, it's just so it's fascinating. It really pulls you in, which as a reader, that's instantly what every author wants, is that hook that pulls the reader in. So can you tell our viewers and listeners your upcoming book that you are working on, and what is it about and what we can expect?
Yeah. So the upcoming book is called Jacob's Wish: A Wielder's Journey. And obviously, and I believe this is always the hardest part for a an author. How do you just explain things without giving away too much?
Right. I know that struggle.
But it has a lot to do with obviously a young man named Jacob who encounters a young girl named Emily. They actually Emily and Abby. They actually begin to share with each other what they went through in life, and they start to formulate this bond, this friendship. Through the way that they dealt with the challenges life has presented.
Mm,
The book has a lot to do with just hope, sacrifice, and the resilience of the human spirit.
right.
Being down, but always understanding that as long as I'm gonna refer to a part of the book, but as long as your head is above water, you're still alive.
Nice. I
You can
like
still
that. I
breathe.
really
You're
like
still
that.
fighting. Yeah.
So let's actually walk through the process. Let's go back in time a bit where you're now creating Jacob's Wish for the very first time. So when you were writing this out, did you have a set of goals in mind when writing the story? And if so, what were they? And in addition to that, what was sort of the need you want to satisfy for your future readers who will pick up this book, either physical or digital?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I wanted to kind of spark in everyone was a call to adventure. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that. Every book because we read books, right? We write
Yes.
books, we read books. I also like playing games. I'm not sure if you at any point in time were a gamer as
Yes.
well. A
I
lot
still
of us
play.
are. Yeah, same here. But even if you were the first person to ever play that game, right? Or the first person to ever read the book when it was printed, the first one that went on that adventure was the person who wrote it. So
Yes.
I don't just want you to simply read it. And that's why things like this are so important. I'd love to stir within you a want to create your own adventure, the
Mm,
kind that you won't just be a part of ours, but you'd let us be a part of yours. And this is what keeps us alive. This is what separates us from AI. This is what makes us as unique as it is, or as unique as we can be. And I don't know. To me, it essentially is that it's that call to adventure. We can do so much sitting down nowadays
yes.
that we don't have to get up and go out and do anything. But there's adventure out there. And as we get older, I did in that thing you read, as it talks about when like all the mysteries of the world have suffered genocide because all of a sudden we have an answer for everything.
Hmm.
Like I necessarily don't think we need an answer for all that. I think that mystery, it gives us something. It gives us something to
Right.
hold on to. And you're little and you're with your friends and you're telling ghost stories or something like that. Like all these moments, they come from the unknown and the what ifs. And
Yes.
that call to adventure is to explore that, to embrace that, not to answer questions, but to ask more.
Nice. That's actually a really, really poetic statement, Atlas, which I guarantee that throughout this interview, you're probably gonna give a lot more examples, which absolutely I love. So once you finish writing the first draft and then editing it, and then question for your cover, was that artwork that your brother did, or was that someone else that you met?
So that actually was artwork that was done by my brother.
Nice.
Yes. And then on the actual Instagram page, there's an image with Jacob walking through the streets. He's kind of holding a paper. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
another image with Abby, and she's standing in front of this huge monster. That was actually done by a girl named Mona Finden. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she actually was the one who did the artwork for the graphic novel remake of Dark Crystal for Netflix, the series.
Oh, no way. Her?
Yeah, yeah. So she did a couple of pieces of artwork for myself. She was commissioned to do it, and we actually got to talking and stuff like that. Really, really awesome person, very talented, very talented. And yeah, so it's kind of cool when you get thrown into the atmosphere. You end up talking to people. You end up making connections, and then by the time
Yes.
you know it, it's you made some really good connections that can be instrumental to what you're trying to do.
That's incredible. And that actually kind of leads into the next question. So, obviously, from your site, your book is still in pre-order. It's going to be released on its date. So, when you decided to, well, after you got it where you wanted to be with the cover, the editing, and everything, what was sort of like the initial reaction like from friends and family? And I don't know if you've done beta readers or ARC readers for this book. What was the initial reaction they got from Jacob's Wish?
So that's a great question. Um, I got a whole bunch of. I didn't hear anything negative. I'm not sure if they were being biased. I have no idea, but I believe that you have to go into something like this and everything you do, always expecting for there to be some sort of negativity, almost. And I just
Hmm.
want to throw this out there as a base for everyone that could be watching this, or they'll use it, as some sort of launching pad for that creative movement in their lives. You're never going to run into anyone that agrees with you 100% on every single thing ever in your
Yes,
life.
that's
It's
true.
not going to happen. So what you have to always do is when you're writing, you make sure you stay true to yourself and exactly what you're trying to present, right? That is enough to keep you busy. If you want
Right.
to please every point of view, I'm going to tell you, you're going to drive yourself crazy, because to do a good job on just what you want to deliver will take enough of your time and energy that you won't have enough for anything else. And there's a great saying I heard a long time ago. It was that an artist, a writer, a painter, a poet, they never finish a piece. They only get to a point where they abandon it. Because no matter how much you write, no matter how much you go back, you can always remake a sentence. You can always change
Yes.
something until you kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, now I need to let this book have its moment of birth, right? And just go out into the
Hmm.
world. And just like a parent, as I'm a father of a 3-year-old, you understand that the same way with your book, all you're going to do is prepare it the best you can. And when it goes out there, it's going to encounter all kinds of people that are going to love it, and people that are going to like it, people that may hate it.
Yes.
You still have to stay strong. There's a post I have, and it says that um I'm trying to quote something that I wrote, which is really weird. This is why I'm not doing a good job at it. It essentially says that you pulled the air into yourself, and you created something out of it. You formed it into the words that you wanted. And when you did it, whether someone loves it, someone hates it, that is 100% you, yours. And because of that, there have to be there has to be a level of pride. It has to be a level of just, wow, like I did that. And it's okay to feel that way. With that being said, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Of course.
I've had some people say they cried
Mm.
read it, which was very interesting because someone called me while they were crying. um, I said, okay, like I expected certain points of the book for there to be an emotional response in that sense. Um, but I wasn't sure if someone would actually, like get
Right.
such an emotional reaction that tears would form. That was something that I didn't. I got a bunch of people saying that they laughed a lot, which is good.
Mhm.
There's definitely some moments I thought were funny inside the book, but you know, it seems to have resonated with some beta readers and editors. And I did get a lot of good feedback. So
That's really good. That's
thank
awesome. And I would imagine that sort of validated, your promise or your goal you set out as an author, as you said in the beginning, where it is to take the reader on an adventure or to inspire that sense of adventure. And going back to what you said just now, how, a book is like the child for an author because we bring this thing into the world and there's a sense of like anxiety, especially for like a beginning author, first time author. And as I said numerous times, viewers and listeners, it's not easy. It's long hours, long edits, anxiety fuel, not going to figure everything out, not going to please everybody. And then when you finally get the book to where you believe it's just right, you publish it and you share it with the world. And then there's that voice of imposter syndrome in the back of every author's mind, or even every creator's mind, be it music, art, writing, literature, whatever.
you.
So for you, Atlas, in your opinion, have you ever had those moments of anxiety or of imposter syndrome with Jacob's Wish? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to not only write this story, but share this story with others to, as you said, inspire that sense of adventure in all readers?
Yeah, there's actually a bunch to unpack there, but I'll start with the fact that Jacob's Wish, and I believe this is the same with any writer. When you begin to write, what stopped me from getting the I guess like what you mentioned, the imposter syndrome, like, oh, like,
Right.
um am I this person in this skin? Is this actually, like, is it all coming together? Can I believe this right now? That this is the reason I didn't go through that was because I tried my best to say at any point, any given time, when something needs to change, it just has to change. And
Mhm.
I'll tell you what I mean. Remember, I said sometimes you get to a point where you abandon it.
Yes.
Well, for myself, I would write, let's say, 6 or 7 pages, and then all of a sudden, after I'm done with 50 or 60 pages, I go and I read again. The reason I did this is because I needed to stay in my my mind space. This is where
Mm.
this is where I'm living in right now. Like, this is what I'm seeing when I'm thinking. When I close my eyes, I want to see 1920s London. I want to feel
Okay.
that. Yeah, I want to smell it. So the whole thing is I go ahead and I search what's being sold in the street at that time. So if I'm walking down, what could I expect to smell? I've even researched what kind of sewer system was happening at that time so I can get a
Mhm.
good idea about how things reacted during flooding. I mean, the amount of detail. And also inside the book, there's a couple of different languages as well. So if someone wants to go as far as doing some research and trying to find out what something is, you realize that some things are written in Swahili, some things are actually written in Latin and in a bunch of different languages. But these kinds of things were important. But when I got to that 40 pages in and I came back, like I said, and I was reading and I'm like, I need to feel like I'm there.
Right.
There have been times, I don't know if this has happened to you, I'll go ahead and delete almost 3 pages of work, like literally 3 pages, 4 pages of work, and replace that with like 25 pages.
Yes, I have done that. Not to the length of like 25 pages, but I have taken out like paragraphs and like put in like, 5 extra pages, which I was, not planning. Cause, you know, absolutely what you said. It is, that space that we're in, like that space of creativeness that we're actually passionate about. And we're actually going to touch on this later, what is the passion that drives us authors, because we're our first target audience for our books. If we don't enjoy it, no one else is going to pick this up. So we have to really enjoy writing this story because our audience is going to pick it up definitely. And that perfectly segues into now the business side of being an author. So now, Atlas, let's actually talk about this. So you got the book, you finished it, you have exactly where you want, you have your social media page. So the decision to publish, did you want to go independent publishing just because you will have more control over your creative property, or did you want to try your hand at traditional publishing, be it a small publishing house in a local state or one of the big ones like Tor, Forge, Del Rey, and the other titans in the publishing industry?
So I actually ended up going the route of traditional publishing, and I'll explain why. Um, I was first thinking about indie publishing. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be an indie author, and there's no better time right now than to be an indie author. And the reason I'll tell
Yes.
you is because you have the same ability at this moment to almost communicate and contact the exact same amount of people as an actual publishing company. Because the only difference is now you can have one person focusing completely on you, which is yourself,
Yes.
as opposed to building with 300 people focusing on thousands of
Yes.
authors. So you actually have the ability now. Now, when I started this book, believe it or not, this is a 7-year journey for me. So when I first said, okay, I'm going to go traditional, um, at that time, I was like, they're going to have connections, obviously, that I don't. They're going to have the ability to do things and to reach out to people that I don't. For example, just for you authors out there, if you have a book and you believe this would be great on Hulu, Netflix, or something like that, right? Isn't that kind of like one of an author's dream? All of a sudden, you write something,
Yes.
it turns into a live action, or it just gets brought into this medium, and all of a sudden, boom! It's like it's a shared dream for almost all of us.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you want your book to be sent to someone, it can't just be like an unsolicited send. Like you can't actually send it. If they got it and it didn't come from an actual publishing company, a lot of times they won't even look at the manuscripts.
That's
So
true.
so the whole thing for me was a lot of people that when they read, you asked me before, what did they say when they read it? How did they feel? A lot of people said this would be great, 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 phenomenal live action type of series or something like that. They were like, as much as I loved reading it, I would love to see this adapted into CGI with all these
Right.
crazy things that are happening. So that was one of the strongest reasons for me to go that route. And I said, I've actually spoken to a couple of people. I'm not going to name the companies, but I
Right.
have
Of
spoken to a couple
course.
of people who have received my manuscript, and there is an interest in that. Will that be seen through? That I can't. I have no idea. And
Right.
I can imagine, even if they are solicited, how many manuscripts these people get to go through.
Right.
They have a package of 400 and they got to pick one. So, you never know how it's going to turn out. But giving yourself that edge is extremely important. Now, the other route is, which is your indie route, is
Mm-hmm.
when you start doing your books, push them out. Push them out, because nothing's going to be louder than you putting your material out there. And 7 years later, as I'm looking now, yeah, you can contact almost everyone you want, and you can make a big ruckus for yourself all over social media where people are like, wow, this is phenomenal, this is excellent. And instead of you having to go and reach out to them, they'll reach out to you. And I've seen things like this happen. I've seen stories like this, and it definitely is a good time to be an indie author.
Definitely, 100%. And I myself, exactly, I'm in that boat. I've now published two books independently, and my third book is already coming out in September, and I've already got my first advanced review, which I'm actually so excited. Which
Yeah, man,
that
awesome.
is always an amazing feeling seeing your first review, and also talking a little bit on traditional publishing. I think a lot of first time authors, when they go traditional publishing, yes, that's been the ultimate goal, the dream for a lot of authors. But I definitely think from some of the authors who I've interviewed, there's sort of that little hesitancy and that, again, anxiety when going to these big ones, because, some people say like they are the gatekeepers of, the genre that they specialize in. That can be a big
I hear that.
turnoff. And the
Mm,
important thing to note is that for traditional publishing, it is a business for these companies. They have to see what book is going to make them the most revenue. And if your book doesn't sell, then unfortunately it's going to sit there, not market at all, and you have to wait till your contract waits out. Or another instance, your book gets entirely marketed the wrong way. Case in point, one of my guests a few weeks ago, Raven Velasco, said her book Blood Triad was marketed as a romantasy novel. It was not a romantasy novel. There was a little bit of romance in it, but the romantasy community grilled her so bad to the point she said on the interview that she will not write a fantasy novel whatsoever. And
oh,
unfortunately, because her book was marketed as a romance fantasy, it really deterred the sales, because it was a historical horror story following a story of vampires set in different historical time periods. And that, of course, comes to the next discussion: the audience. The audience is very, very important for us authors, because we have to really understand, okay, who exactly are we marketing towards? Are we marketing towards the fantasy audience? Okay, what subgroup of the fantasy audience? Romance fantasy, high epic fantasy, um, noir fantasy, and I found out that actually is a thing. But all of these different
yeah.
subgroups are all very important to us authors, and it's really important for us to understand who exactly are we writing for, because as I said in the beginning, we're the target audience initially. So for you, Atlas, do you have a good understanding of Jacob's Wish prior to the release of your book? And in your opinion, how important is it for an author to really understand their audience before they go about publishing their book?
So this is an interesting question. There's a guy I know who created a magazine, and the magazine he created, and let me give you a little story here, right? The magazine
All
he
right.
created, he wasn't sure who this was for. He wrote the magazine for a specific group of people. All of a
Mm,
sudden, his magazine started selling, and he started selling, and all of a sudden, he had an event where he went to, where he was going to bring the magazines and say hi to people and introduce himself. The people that came were not the people he thought he wrote the
yes.
magazine for. So he ended up finding out that the magazine was actually he was trying to do it for musicians. However, he did his own artwork and stuff like that inside the magazine, and it ended up attracting like a very heavy goth crowd. So
Really?
yeah, when he was there, he was expecting to see guitarists, drummers talking about
Mm-hmm.
new bands, because he does like to do reviews for new bands and their work and all that good stuff. And no, it wasn't the group. So this is what I would say about the importance of knowing your audience. You would never have believed that as a young person earlier in my life, because I've been living in Texas for about 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier in my life, when I actually lived in the New York, New Jersey area, that I was going to be someone who grew up in that atmosphere, who actually fell in love with the writing of Shakespeare, who got very involved in the sciences and stuff. It just wasn't something that was like usually seen And I would say it's good to write and have an idea who your audience is, but your audience could come from the most unlikely of places.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, those are going to be the people that they hold on to your work in such a way that you couldn't even imagine. And I'm going to tell you why. If you say I'm writing this book and I'm writing it for this group of people, right? They've already read a lot of times this kind of material. They have
Yes.
so much that they can compare, contrast, and come back and forth with. But it's those people that you pull into the genre by what you wrote that now are like, this is my Harry Potter. This is my foundation. If you want to do a sci-fi opera or something like, this is my I mean, this I'm gonna go naming all the books, but you understand what I mean. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
people who essentially, when they come in and they come in because of what they found in your work, those are the ones that they'll stay for a lifetime and they'll be there waiting for you to come out with stuff. So it's good to say, I have an idea of who I'm writing for, but I also have no idea who is going to be attracted to what I'm putting out there. But I'm ready and willing to accept every and everyone that comes in and they like the work. Then you understand, they say you don't get to choose your family.
Yes, that's a very popular phrase.
You don't get to choose your audience either, because it'll consist of some things you expect and probably a bunch of things you don't.
Definitely. And you touch on something which I absolutely agree, which is, the audience is it's a 50-50. You could get the audience that you are writing for, but just as you said, Atlas, the people that you are trying to market towards, they've read stories like this numerous times. They already know what to expect. They already know the beat of the drum. It's the people who do not read in this genre. They may read a book in the genre every now and then, but it's not their preferred. If you can grab them, then you have a new audience, which now segues perfectly into the next part, which is the inspiration. Now,
Mm.
normally, I've always had this question focusing on, who were the inspirations for all of my guests, who are the big motivators story wise and stuff like that. But a recent guest I had in July, Eric Bowden, he gave
Mm.
me something to really consider. And that was this. I'm sure you have seen books like this, Atlas, where they have the tagline, the next George R. Martin, the next J.K. Rowling, the next Tolkien, and stuff like that. Now, from a reader's perspective, we like seeing those taglines like that because we already get a preconceived notion of what to expect. But if you look from the author's point of view, to have that tagline is not really the best because, again, people are expecting the prose to be written in the same way as their favorite authors, the characters to be depicted in the same style or act in a certain way. But that's not true. It's good to be inspired, but it's never a good idea to replicate or to imitate. In his words, when people pick up his books, he wants the readers to really get an idea of this is who I am and this is how I, Eric Bowden, write my stories. So that way, when another book of his come out, they now have a good idea of what to expect from his writing and his voice as an author. So I know that's a very loaded question, but to kind of wrap it in together, just briefly, who would you say have been sort of like the stories you grew up with that you believe helped motivate your writing style? And in regards to the second part about, finding your voice as an author, how
Mm.
integral is that to an author to really show the publishing world, here I am, this is me?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with it's kind of what you take away.
Mm,
So I loved Asimov, right? I was a huge fan of Foundation. The reason is because I remember the first time I read it, the detail, the way that he went into detail about everything, whether it be a sound, whether it be a feeling, whether it was a touch. Well, touch is not just a touch. What is a touch? There's a point in Jacob's Wish where Abby hugs Jacob
mm,
and he feels her fingertips on his back in the hug. And he says, it's amazing how Jacob always thought it was amazing or odd or, that you can touch your own flesh a million times a day and feel absolutely nothing. But when someone else touches you, every part of you reaches for that. Every part of you knows where you're being touched. It's almost like your mind, body, and soul live and feed on that kind of interaction. And it's unquenching. Every single time someone comes and you're not expecting and they touch you, you feel it. It pulls. It's just different. We touch ourselves all day and we don't have that feeling. So this is kind of like what I'm trying to allude to. I love the fact that that Isaac went into these details, and I would consider him a bit of an inspiration. However, the inspiration was detailed in the way he does things. But I'm not going to explain things the way
mm.
Isaac explains it. I just enjoyed the fact that a breeze passing by wasn't just a breeze. Maybe it gave you comfort. Maybe a smell traveled through the air. Maybe it pulled something with it, right? Maybe it took
Right.
something. That's a very deep and profound way of thinking of it as well. And it is it's things like that I believe can actually help you find your voice without adopting too much of someone else's work. And because there's a very thin line between
Yeah.
appreciating and appropriating, I guess is the term I'm
Yes.
looking for. And once you do that, then you kind of fall into this space where you are understanding, like, wow, this is how I actually explain stuff. This is how I kind of do it. And your audience and those people that read, they're gonna know that.
Yes.
They'll read something one day. It could be a snippet. And by the way someone describes what happened and the feeling and everything, they're gonna be like, ooh. And I know people that do that. Like they'll hear something and it'll be like, that's this author. That's that author.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, wow, you can really tell not from the words. It doesn't matter who's saying it or the tone in their voice or anything, but rather the way their sentences were, tetrised together.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then also now going back to the audience, but now some more the readership. And I think the readership is very important because I'm
Mhm.
sure you definitely will agree, Atlas, that when it comes to writing books, again, we talked about audience, we talked about writing style. Well, now when it comes to really marketing your book, where exactly does your book fall within the readership of your readership's age? Because I've talked with a lot of authors, especially young adult authors, who have written books where they're not solely catering to the young adult category, but they're not catering also to the new adult or adult uh, age group. The book is somewhat in the middle, where both age groups can sort of come together. Because I'm sure you've definitely read books that may have been marketed to one audience, but upon reading it a second time, there's like, okay, this is more towards the adult section, especially romance fantasies when it comes to the spice. I've had a lot of young adult fantasy writers, romantasy writers specifically, who have said that that's probably the biggest thing in that genre, is to where you wanted to have romance, but you don't want to go on the verge of erotic descriptions and nature.
Yeah.
So for you, Atlas, where does your book sort of fall in the category for Jacob's Wish? Would you say it's more like in the middle, or would you say it's carrying to either side?
I would say it's more in the middle. And how do I put that? So there's certain words when I did my research that if I use the specific word, I know you know this, it automatically is no longer considered safe for certain ages. And then you
Yes.
use other words, it can no longer be, for instance, like the word rape. That's something that can't be used when you're writing. If you're writing for a certain group, suicide is another one. Where all of
Hmm.
a sudden now you've completely removed yourself from an entire audience, and now you're in. So when you say catering, that's one of the things I thought to myself, like there were things and challenges that people face, but there's ways to write it without writing it. There's ways to
Yes.
explain it without explaining them. Sometimes you can convey that emotion without going all the way in there. And the reason you, to me anyway, you don't want to go all the way straight out to just saying the words like pure erotica, right? Is because we're reading here. I mean, there's already a vision. We already have mentals. We already have things going on in
Right.
our head. There's a lot happening. And I believe in, having the some loose, wiggly train tracks. I don't need to tell you every single thing to the point of something like, getting into the realm of erotica where we're in that there's many other ways to describe things. So with that being said, what I try to do my best is actually stay right in between. I want to have a book that you're going to grow with, that if you read in 10 years, you would be like, wow, can read that today and it still relates today. Something like kind of like what you were alluding
Yeah.
to before. But when I read it as a child, it related to me as a child, or related as a teen, it related to me as a teen. I'll put it to you this way. The most successful gaming company ever, I believe, is probably Nintendo. Um,
Yes.
yeah, they don't have the most powerful systems. They don't have, but what they have is what you are probably going to first play when you're a child. The first thing you're probably going to grab is going to be a Nintendo system. The first games you're going to play are probably going to end up being Mario or Sonic or something like that. And as you grow up, yeah, you're going to go into other things. It'll be how you explore other things, but you're always still going to have a love and affinity towards that because it was essentially that base, like that platform. And that's what I would like to do. I would like to actually have something that as the second, third book, fourth book comes out, it's something that you grow with while the characters are growing. So
Yes.
I believe, and tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong, someone who writes 10 books, the first book can actually start out being the most PG book. And then by the time you get to the fourth and fifth book, you are like rated R, like there is a lot of crazy stuff happening. And it's because if you write in a way where you give your characters a chance to grow and those who are reading a chance to grow with it, you create a much more intimate connection with those who are reading. And it's just something that you can be a part of for a very long time.
Absolutely. And I love that analogy you gave for Nintendo because it is true. I remember growing up with a Nintendo 64. That was my console growing up. I had Super Mario 64, Star Fox, the original Star Fox, Donkey Kong Adventures.
Oh,
And
great
he's not
games.
wrong, viewers and listeners. Nintendo is probably the one game system that is truly for the whole family. You see more commercials of Nintendo showing groups of people playing of all ages enjoying it. And that's what makes Nintendo so successful. Yes, their
Can I
games
add something there?
are, oh, of course.
It's only going to be a small thing, but I love what you said. You said something that's awesome. You're going to see commercials, the whole family playing. However, you won't see a commercial for certain games where there's a kid playing it or a family playing it. No, but you will see the whole family coming together around that. So I loved that analogy you made right there because it is spot on. It's something the whole family's enjoying. So yeah,
Mhm.
no, continue. That was awesome.
But yeah, it is true because if you look at Xbox and PlayStation, their target audience is usually teenagers and adults and their video games. I love some of the best video games like Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, and God of War Ragnarok, Doom, Gears of War, Halo. Okay,
Phenomenal.
case in point, the Halo game. That is a game that's grown up with its fans. That is a story that fans have been in love with since the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's continued to evolve. The audiences has definitely changed,
Yeah.
but that's the thing for like writing books. Like the audience is definitely going to change over time, but if it can still hook the people in with that sense of you're playing this person going on this galactic level adventure, then you succeeded in your task. Which now kind of leads into another question. This is probably one of my heavy hitter questions. Now, going back
Okay.
to what you said earlier, Atlas, how ultimately an author should just write a good story that's going to be engaging for its reader. I definitely feel, and maybe you have some thoughts on this too,
Mhm.
that for first-time authors, we always want to try to, appease everybody. That's where I should start with. Where we want to try to appease everyone. We want to hit the same markets, and we want to be in the same genre. I've actually talked with a lot of authors on this, and they said it's not normally the best situation, especially if your book's already written, but the opposite genre or the different subgenre is on the market. So you try to add elements that don't feel organic, but you only added them with the sole purpose of joining the train, the gravy train. And this comes down to what I like to call the two paths: to be an author and to be known as an author. In my opinion, to be an author is an individual dedicated to the art of storytelling where capital and money is not the sole motivation. It's nice, but it's not the sole motivation for writing. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to uh, marketing their books, making their brand, going on shows, podcasts, making banners, making promo videos, all of that to get their name across.
Mhm.
And either side has its own hurdles, but I definitely feel for first time authors, that second path is much more the ideal aspect. But we have to consider what are the long term goals. Because if you think that you can make a living off of your first book, that's not really, wise,
No.
nor is it practical, which comes to a very important point, which is in the publishing world, there is no guarantee that your first book is going to start your legacy as an author. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. There have been many authors whose first books jump them to award winning status, which is an incredible feat. But normally, your first book gets your foot in the door. It's the books
Yeah.
that come after which potentially can start your legacy, maybe your 10th or your 20th book. And that's the book that people most know you for. I've met a few authors whose 7th, 10th, 15th book was the start of their legacy as an author in the sense that it became a career and they were able to live off of that. So ultimately, Atlas, in your opinion, how important is it for authors to really understand this concept that in the publishing world, there is no guarantee that your debut anything is going to be the start of your legacy, but it should not deter you from being a storyteller if being an author is something you truly want to do? Because as we said in the beginning, it's a lonely feeling, it's long hours, it's not a get rich quick scheme.
Definitely not. So there's something I'll throw in there. Every single person who's an author, every single one, with the exception of those who have been, ridiculously successful with their books, uh, have a job. You get up, you go to the job you really don't want to go to. We've all had the conversation. You'd rather make enough money and stay home and write. But the thing is, never forget what your goal is. Okay, if
Right.
you make one book and you put the one book out there and you're like, okay, well, all eggs are in this basket, and if it works, then it works. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. Like you said, it's not necessarily realistic, because the worst thing that can happen is if you wrote your first book and your first book comes out and all of a sudden people like it, then you don't have anything else coming out for 2 or 3 years. What's going to happen to the audience? Well, they're going to come, they'll like, and then they'll leave. Which is one of the wonderful reasons why when you have someone who writes 4 or 5 books and they continue doing the work, what happens is as the audience begins to grow and the word begins to spread, now the people who you have entertained have more stories to be entertained by. And those who are now coming in are like walking into a Netflix series a year after it premiered and they can go through the whole first season.
Yes, yes, that
Right
is
away.
true.
Yeah. Get hooked, get caught up, and be like, okay, now I'm caught up. Now I'm gonna wait for the next one, right? And but I think it's really important for people to realize that, if this is what you're doing and it's something that your heart is in, then, if you wake up to go to work every day, to pay the bills that you have and to do so on and so forth, but your heart is not necessarily in that, then make time for what your heart is into.
Definitely.
Make the time. The biggest problem I have experienced in my life, and I'm pretty sure many other people have as well, is after you're done catering to all the needs and necessities of life, now you need to try to find the time where you can sit down and do some of those little things that you love with regard to, your creative word I'm looking for. I can't find it right now, but essentially using, your creativity and, just keep going. You learn, you'll get better as time goes on. If you started writing like I did, one of the first things I ever wrote was a book I call The Coldest Religion. And it has a couple of really good bits in it. And but when I went back and read it about, I don't know, 10, 12 years later, I was like, wow, this is not me. This is not how I write. This is not how I put things together. This is not how I convey sentiment or feeling. It's just you change. And another good reason to keep writing is you get to see that. You get to see it. You can't just start now, stop now because something is not successful. And
Right.
ultimately, if you're a good storyteller, like Gabriel just stated, then it's in your heart to tell the story. It's in your heart to put it out there. So do it. Not everyone's gonna have a group of people behind them cheering them on with every sentence they write. It's not gonna happen. And even the people who are in that position at one point in time had no cheerleaders. I mean, you mentioned JK not too long ago. I mean, imagine just being, in poverty. You have no one around you. Then all of a sudden, you become the best-selling author in history. You become a billionaire off of what you've done. That is perseverance. That's pushing through a situation and saying, I'm still going to make this happen.
Right.
Now, ultimately, I would say at the end is make sure you make it happen for you. As long as you're happy, as long as you're pleased, depending on, of course, on what your goals are, keep growing, keep learning. No experience. The only experience or the only bad experience is when you don't learn from. All experiences are great as
Right.
long as you learn from them and you don't have to repeat them again. So there's a lot of touches towards just human growth, right? Professional growth, growth as an author.
Right. Absolutely. And we just nearing the end of this incredible author interview. So the final two questions, I'm
Mhm.
going to combine them together. So what you talked about just now, not everyone started off with like cheerleaders who have been in their corner, really helping them, because you definitely hit a nail on the head. Especially for independent authors, it's not easy. But the best thing about social media, especially Book Talk and Bookstagram, there's so many indie authors or authors in general. It's insane. Heck, a majority of my guests from this year alone have been from Instagram. It's so incredible. And I've learned so much from them. So,
Yeah.
with that in mind, Atlas, besides,
Mhm.
of course, friends and family, are there any authors that you've met on your journey as an author on social media that you would like to give a shout out to, who who have really helped you understand the business better when you started off in the beginning 7 years ago?
Well, the first person I'm actually going to mention is a guy who is definitely, without a doubt, putting a lot into what they're doing and what they hope to get out of it. And what I mean by that is, everything starts somewhere. Everything starts somewhere. The old saying, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. You know, a huge, gigantic Colosseum wasn't built in a day. It started with one brick that you laid, and then
Right.
another, and then another, and then another. And this person, I feel, is going down that path to where, and not just that, at the same time, they're doing a great service for just authors in general. Sometimes we need the ability to speak and to be heard as well, just to
Right.
let people know who we're about, what we're about. And yeah, so yeah, without further ado, Gabriel Garcia is doing a wonderful job at that. He right now is putting those bricks down. I've looked at your page and I went through some of your videos, and I see the work you're putting in. This is something that you're doing, and at the same time, you're writing. And listen, he's asking the questions that a lot of people want answers to, but at the same time, he's also getting multiple variations of these answers. And and we all have questions.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I look at some of these videos, I'm like, oh, I like that. Oh, that was good. This was a wonderful response, a wonderful answer. This is what doing the work looks like. You do it, and I profoundly believe that your viewership is gonna skyrocket, and people that are gonna want information as far as what are these authors thinking, what are these authors doing. And then when some of these authors, which I believe some will, end up skyrocketing into stardom, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, oh look, he has an interview here. It's so awesome. And there's a lot of people that of course I can name, but I would imagine that in many cases, people overlook something like what you're doing, which is why I actually wanted to name you. It's very easy. Trust me, I know a lot of authors that I can name, but you're not just doing something for yourself. You're really doing something for us as well, which is why one of the first things I texted you, I don't know if you remember, was I'm actually extremely grateful that you're even taking the time to do something like this,
Mm-hmm.
because
I remember.
people just don't do it a lot of times. And I hate to say it, we get very focused on what we're doing, and we don't think about other authors. We don't think about the others out there working towards the
Mm-mm.
same goal. All we think is about us, our books, and our problems and our stuff. So yeah, if anyone needs a shout out right here, and it's definitely obviously something I plan on sharing as well. Uh, this interview, and putting the link up so people can go to it as well. I think it's you, and I'm really grateful. And understand this, guys. All of us are in different seasons of our writing, right? But we all need things like this. We all need information like this. We all need help like this. We all need to know that we're not all having the most wonderful time in the world while we're doing this. A lot of us are actually super overworked. We're doing a lot of stuff, and then we're coming and we're sitting down and we're letting ourselves melt into our creativity with whatever ounces we have left. And this is the reality of for most of us. So something like this, I believe, what you're doing is celebrating it. When you're asking these questions and you're talking to people like myself, it's celebrating it, and it's something I think we should be grateful for. Because I know that if you could, you'd be doing interviews all the time while you work on while you're working on your own stuff. I can tell you take it seriously. I've seen this man's emails, people. He doesn't play around. He's serious about what he's doing, and yeah, definitely kudos to you, sir.
Wow, Alice, thank you so very much. I am touched by that, and Would you believe me if I told you that I've only been doing this since January of last year on
Wow.
YouTube? I initially started off, no one saw my face. It was only my voice. It was on Anchor, and that was 2 years before that, around fall of 2021, 22, or I was just interviewing people in my inner circle on Inkit. For those who don't know, Inkit is an online writers platform. That's where I met a lot of people there. Kim Applegren, Lori Ball, Jalen Winchester, and many more. And then I want to say when I moved out to Orange, which was where I'm originally from,
Hmm.
before going back to from Orange, then went to San Diego, California, not Texas. I know people kind of get those two mixed up, but no, San Diego in California, and then coming back to Orange like 2 years ago. I then made a decision to then interview historians, and then of course that skyrocketed into last year interviewing authors. Now where people can see my face and actually have a platform, would then allowed me to go on LinkedIn to build my newsletter, which was still in its
Mm.
infancy. But
Yeah.
now that it's been a year, my newsletter is a lot more polished. I actually have a brand logo, which I'm very proud of. And honestly, I did not expect to be doing this as part of my journey as an author and as a content creator, especially. And honestly, I'm blessed to have met so many people from all different walks of life who tell the same stories but in different ways, and learning what their overall goals are for the future. And going back to legacy, which is now going to tie it back to this final question,
Mhm.
as two of my authors have said, Kim Applegren and Damien Schillingford, they all agree that our words are our legacy. No matter if we sell thousands of books or just one book, our books are our legacy for the next generation. And in the case of Damien Schillingford, in his interview, he said that he wanted his children to grow up with these stories, to know who their father was, what he was like through his words. And going with Kim, that sense of legacy leads to a sense of immortality, because authors like um, J.R. Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings, Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs, who's also the author of John Carter of Mars. Those are incredible works of fiction that have survived the tests of time, who have inspired other writers to make their own story. Frank Herbert's Dune, which was already a popular book when it came out, but with the introduction of the movies, what happened? It skyrocketed the book to the
Definitely.
front page of every newsletter on Barnes and
Yeah.
Noble, Amazon, and everything. And I've learned
And
so
we're
much
talking about something
from a
that has
lot of
been this,
authors.
yeah, something that has been that amazing since, like, I don't want to say forever, but it feels like it's been that amazing. The movie didn't make it that amazing. This was written a long time ago, and this is
Yeah,
what it was. Yeah,
this
you're
is
right. Totally right.
definitely. And to tie this all together, so here it is, Atlas. With everything
Mhm.
you are still learning about the industry, and hope to further refine and improve down the road with Jacob's Wish and other books and other works you have in your mind that you want to share with your audience. What is your word of wisdom amongst all the pieces of advice you've given in this interview, which are all been very impactful? What is another piece of wisdom you would want to share with the viewers and listeners watching and listening to this right now?
A couple of things come to mind, but I believe that the most important one would be, don't believe in something based off of another person's ability to reflect that back at you.
Mm,
Because if that's the case, then yeah, did you ever really believe in it? So in other words, what I'm saying is when you write and you create and you do whatever it is that you do it with the full conviction of what it is that you're doing and what you're putting your heart and your mind into, what you're putting everything into. That if someone does like it or someone doesn't like it, it does not matter. It's yours. And because it's yours, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it is alive, it is growing, it is recorded, it's probably published in whatever way you went to do it. And it's a part of who you are. And
Yes.
never let a comment, never let a word, never let a review separate you from parts of who you are, because we're all growing and we're all learning. And one day we're going to get there, but without those first steps, there is no final product.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, and a perfect bow to this incredible and very philosophical and poetic, I might add, author interview on the channel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another author interview here on the channel, a late night special, I might add. And thank you to our guest, Atlas, for joining us today. Atlas, thank you so very much. Now, before you go, where can people find and engage with you on social media, and where can people go to pre-order Jacob's Wish?
So on social media, you want to start out with s.m.atlas. This is going to get you to the Instagram page. From there, you can click on the website, and the website is going to be, or it actually has now, but I will continue to give more information on Jacob's Wish. It will continue to provide more images and things like that. There's also, like I explained to you, my publisher's working on a video, which I'm hoping to have possibly by the end of the week, which I can share. And I actually never thought of a video. They told me they're working on one, so I was like, okay, like I guess that's just how it goes. And from there, you're going to be able to get all the updates. And there's also a Jacob's Wish email if you wanted to reach out personally. You had any questions? It is something that I personally monitor, and would love to. I'd love to talk to any of you guys. Absolutely.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. And also, I like to add, for those who are interested in artwork, I am still giving away this custom print of Michael, Last Angel of Earth for every pre-order of Michael before it goes on sale in September. So all you have to do is pre-order a copy of Michael, message me on Instagram with proof of your receipt and an email I can send the link to, or rather the image to, for you to have. And if you want me to e-sign it, I'd be more than happy to do so. Or if you would like to read an advanced copy of Michael, I'll also be linking below the ARC application, which I'm still doing until the release date on September. So thank you also very much for joining us for a late night author interview. Again, thank you to our guest, Atlas, for coming on the show. This will not be the last time. I plan to have Atlas back on the channel when his next work is coming about. Maybe it will be a sequel to Jacob's Wish, or maybe it will be a different story. Who knows? You have to follow his Instagram and mine to stay up to date, as well as follow my newsletter on LinkedIn. So make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful evening.